You feel it before you even have proof. Something shifted, something went quiet, and you're sitting there trying to figure out if you're being paranoid or if your gut is actually telling you something real. That feeling you can't shake at 3 a.m, or that weird distance that showed up out of nowhere. That look in the eyes that used to make you feel like the only person in the room, but now just slides past you like you're made of glass. Yeah, that feeling. It's not paranoia, or it's information. And today we are going to talk about what that information is actually telling you. Because here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. When someone with an avoidant attachment style has already emotionally moved on and chosen someone else, they don't announce it. They don't sit you down. They don't hand you a letter. They don't even fully admit it to themselves. What they do instead is way more confusing, way more painful, and it leaves you second guessing everything you thought you knew about yourself and about them. So if you've been feeling like something is off, but you can't quite put your finger on it, stay with me because the signs are there. They've always been there. You just needed someone to name them for you. And before we go any further, I want you to pause for just 1 second. If any of this is landing for you, if any of it is making your chest feel tight, drop the word aware in the comments right now. Just that one word, aware. Because the first step to protecting your peace is knowing what you're actually dealing with. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because what we talk about on this channel is the kind of thing that can genuinely change how you see yourself and how you let other people treat you. Okay. Let's get into it. So first, let me set the stage. Let me tell you who we're really talking about when we talk about someone with avoidant attachment. Because understanding this person is the foundation of everything else we're going to cover. An avoidant person learned very early in life that needing people was dangerous, that reaching out for closeness either got no response or caused some kind of pain. So they did what any smart, adaptive human being does. They built walls. They learned to suppress their emotional needs. They learned to value self-sufficiency above everything else. They told themselves a story. The story goes something like this: I don't really need anyone. I'm better alone. People always let me down in the end. Getting too close is how you get hurt. And they believed that story so deeply that it became the operating system running underneath everything they do in relationships. It's not that they don't have feelings. They have enormous feelings. It's that those feelings scare them. Closeness scares them. Vulnerability feels like a threat. And so they've become absolute masters at emotional distance, at pulling back right when things start to feel real. Now, here is where it gets complicated, because when an avoidant person is with you, there is a window of genuine connection. A time when they're present enough, safe enough, interested enough to actually let you in a little bit. And that window is so intoxicating. That version of them is so worth loving. You see the real person behind all those walls and you think, okay, this is it. This is someone worth fighting for. And you start building your whole emotional world around catching glimpses of that person. But avoidant people, by the nature of how they're wired, are always on the lookout for an exit. Not because they're cruel, but because closeness eventually triggers their nervous system. Eventually, the relationship starts to feel like a cage. The familiarity starts to feel like a trap. And whether consciously or not, they start scanning for something that feels new, something that feels lighter, something that hasn't yet triggered all their fears around intimacy. And that's when another person enters the picture. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not saying every avoidant person cheats or is dishonest. What I am saying is that there is a very specific pattern of behavior that shows up when an avoidant has emotionally shifted their attention towards someone else. When they've made a quiet internal decision that they're not going to tell you about, a decision they might not even fully acknowledge to themselves. And these patterns are recognizable. Once you know what to look for, you can see them clearly. So let's talk about the 4 things. The 4 specific things an avoidant does when they have already chosen another woman over you. The first one, they become emotionally unreachable, but blame it on being busy. This is the one that gets so many people because on the surface it sounds reasonable. Everyone gets busy, life gets hectic, work piles up, stress happens, and so when they start pulling back and they say, hey, I've just got a lot going on right now, your rational brain goes, okay, that makes sense. I'll give them space. I'll be understanding, or I'll wait it out. And you start waiting, but here is what emotional intelligence teaches us. And this is something Daniel Goleman wrote about with such clarity. Our emotional states are communicated not through our words, but through our patterns, through the frequency of contact, through the quality of attention, through what someone does when the pressure is off and they have a free moment. That's when you see who someone is choosing. Because think about it. A genuinely busy person still finds moments to reach out to the people who matter to them. A genuinely stressed person still sends a quick message at the end of the day saying, "Hey, thinking of you, rough day, but I'm okay." Because when someone is truly connected to you, you are a comfort to them, not an obligation. But when an avoidant has emotionally pivoted towards someone else, you stop being the comfort. You become part of what they're avoiding. And the busyness narrative becomes incredibly convenient because it's not a lie exactly. They might genuinely be busy, but the busyness suddenly and specifically applies to you there is somehow enough time for everything and everyone else, just not quite enough for whatever you were hoping for from them. And what makes this so emotionally confusing is that when you try to name it, when you try to say, "Hey, I feel like we've been distant lately," they look genuinely baffled. They say, "What do you mean I've been busy?" Or "You know how things have been." And you start to feel like the crazy one, like you're demanding too much, like you should be more understanding. And so you back off and they breathe a small internal sigh of relief because the pressure has eased. And the distance grows a little more. This is not accidental. It's a behavioral pattern built on years of emotional self-protection. When an avoidant feels the pull towards someone new, they begin the process of emotionally withdrawing from what is current and familiar. And they do it incrementally. So incrementally that by the time you notice the gap, it's already been there for weeks. You need to trust your nervous system here. When the connection that used to feel easy starts to feel like work, when you're the one always initiating and always coming up with reasons why it's probably fine, pay attention. That discomfort you're feeling is your emotional intelligence trying to give you information. It's trying to tell you that something real has changed. The second thing, they stop fighting for the relationship but let you fight for it instead. This one cuts deep because it's so subtle and it takes advantage of something beautiful in you. Your capacity to care, your willingness to show up, your belief that if you just love hard enough, if you just communicate better, if you just give them more space or more presence or more patience, you can fix whatever has gone wrong. And here is the thing. Avoidants know this about you, not in a calculating, manipulative way necessarily, but on some level they sense that you will hold the relationship up while they quietly let go of their end, and they let you do it because it serves them. It keeps things comfortable enough that they don't have to have a hard conversation. It gives them the freedom to drift towards something new without the guilt of having actively walked away. When someone is truly committed to a relationship, both people feel the weight of maintaining it. Both people notice when things feel off, and both people try to do something about it. There's a mutual investment, a shared urgency. When one person starts to emotionally disengage, that mutuality disappears, and you're left feeling like you're rowing a boat alone, exhausted, confused about why they're not picking up their oar, telling yourself they must just need time. Goleman talks about what he called the amygdala hijack. That moment when an emotional trigger shuts down rational processing and floods the system with a single overwhelming response. For you in this situation, that hijack often looks like anxiety, like the frantic need to fix things, to say the right words, to do something that makes them feel the connection again. And that anxiety, though it makes complete sense given what you're experiencing, actually plays right into the avoidance pattern. Because here's what happens in that dynamic. The more you pursue, the more they pull back. The more you try to reconnect, the more suffocated they feel. And they use that as internal evidence that the relationship is the problem, that you are too much, that they need someone who doesn't make them feel this way. And they start to paint the other woman in their mind as easier, lighter, more fun, less pressure. but what they're actually responding to is the natural consequence of their own withdrawal. You wouldn't be anxious if they hadn't pulled away. You wouldn't be fighting so hard if they were fighting alongside you. The dynamic they're using to justify their emotional exit was created by their own behavior in the first place. When you notice that you are the only one trying, when every effort to reconnect feels like it's being met with a polite but distant response, when you're the one suggesting everything and planning everything and reaching out first every single time, that is not a relationship anymore. That's you holding on to something that has already let go of you. And as painful as it is to see that clearly, seeing it clearly is the beginning of your power. The third thing, they become suddenly very private about their phone and their time. Now, before I go any further, I want to acknowledge that privacy is healthy in relationships. People are allowed to have friendships and spaces and conversations that are their own. I'm not talking about someone who has always maintained healthy boundaries around their personal life. What I'm talking about is a shift, a sudden change in behavior that doesn't match the pattern you've been living together. You know how someone behaves in a relationship after years or months of observation. You know what's normal for them. And when the normal changes, that matters. That is data. When an avoidant has started genuinely investing emotional energy in someone else, something shifts in how they handle their private world. The phone that used to sit face up on the table starts sitting face down. The easy, casual conversations about their day start to have gaps in them. Little vague patches where the detail just isn't quite there. Plans start to become flexible in ways they never used to be. Cancellations start coming with explanations that don't quite add up. And again, none of this would register as significant in isolation. But it's never in isolation. It's always part of a cluster of changes that are all pointing in the same direction. Here is what emotional intelligence research tells us about human behavior under guilt or hidden information. People become avoidant of reminders. They start to manage access, not dramatically, not obviously, just enough to create a buffer between the truth and the people who are closest to it. And because avoidant people are already skilled at creating emotional distance, they are extremely good at this management. It comes almost naturally to them. What you'll also notice is that they become more defensive faster. A casual question about what they've been up to, something you would have asked 100 times before with no reaction at all, suddenly gets met with a slightly sharp edge of what's with all the questions energy. And then they soften it immediately because they don't want a confrontation. But that flash of defensiveness is a signal. Defensive people are protecting something. The painful part about this one is that it makes you feel like you're losing your mind. Because on the surface, nothing is being said. No admissions are being made. If you try to name it, you sound paranoid. You sound jealous and insecure, and they know that. Consciously or not, they know that the plausible deniability of small, secretive behaviors is an incredibly effective shield, because you can't argue with nothing, but you don't have to argue with it. You don't have to prove it. You just have to pay attention to how you feel inside the relationship and ask yourself honestly, does this feel like safety? Does this feel like partnership? Does this feel like someone who is fully here with me? And if the answer is no, that answer deserves your respect. The fourth thing, they begin painting you as the problem. This is perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated of all four. And it's the one that does the most lasting damage if you let it run unchecked. Because what it does is it rewrites the story. It shifts the narrative in a way that allows the avoidant to feel justified in what they're doing. And it does it by making you the villain of your own relationship. Here is how it works. When an avoidant has already emotionally moved towards someone else, they have a problem. That problem is cognitive dissonance. They understand on some level that what they're doing is not aligned with their commitments. It creates internal tension, and that tension is uncomfortable. So the human brain, being the remarkable rationalization machine that it is, starts to build a case, or a case for why this is okay, a case for why they're actually the wronged party, a case for why you have driven them to this. And so suddenly, subtly, things start to be your fault. You're too emotional. You're too needy. You put too much pressure on things. You're never satisfied. You've changed. The relationship has felt heavy for a while, and you've been the heavy one. They have quietly been suffering, and now they finally found something that feels light and good, and maybe that is just what they need. This narrative is constructed slowly, through small comments, through sighs, through a certain look when you express a need, through the way they talk about the relationship when it comes up. And the insidious thing is that some of what they say might have a grain of truth in it. Because all real relationships have friction. All real relationships have moments of heaviness and difficulty. And so when they start naming those real moments as the evidence of your inadequacy, it's easy to take it on. It's easy to start believing that if you had just been different, if you had just been better, they would have stayed. But here is what emotional intelligence actually teaches us about this. Relationship difficulties are shared responsibilities, always. Two people create the dynamic between them. And when one person starts pointing all of the fingers in one direction, that very act of pointing is its own kind of information. Healthy people who are struggling in a relationship say, what can we do differently? They don't quietly build a case for why their partner is the problem while simultaneously investing emotional energy in someone new. Goleman's work on empathy and emotional attunement is relevant here too, because what this behavior represents is a fundamental failure of empathy. The willingness to make someone else carry the weight of your own unacknowledged choices. To let them believe that they are the reason for a distance that has nothing to do with their value and everything to do with someone else's inability to face themselves honestly. And I need you to hear this clearly. Whatever version of you they're critiquing right now, whatever flaws they're suddenly very focused on, whatever things they're saying you need to work on, none of that changes the fundamental truth. You deserve someone who chooses you on purpose every day. Someone who sees your complexity and your imperfection and your full, beautiful, difficult humanity and says, yes, I'm choosing you, not as a default. Not because nothing better has come along, but because when they imagine their life, you are in it and they want you to be there. That is the baseline. That is the minimum. And anything less than that is not something worth pouring yourself into. So where does this leave you? What do you do with all of this? Because knowing something and knowing what to do with it are two very different things. And I don't want to leave you with just the pain of recognition. I want to leave you with something that actually helps. The first thing I want to say is this. You cannot fix this by changing yourself. I know that's hard to hear because changing yourself feels like something you can control. You can promise to be less anxious, less emotional, less whatever they've accused you of being. You can work on yourself endlessly and beautifully, and that work is worth doing, but not as a strategy to earn back someone who has already emotionally left. Because the issue is not you. The issue is them and their own unresolved patterns around intimacy and fear and connection. Avoidant attachment isn't something you caused, and it's not something you can love away. It takes years of intentional personal work to genuinely shift those deep patterns. And that work has to come from inside the person who holds the pattern. It cannot be forced or coaxed or inspired into existence by a partner who loves them enough. What you can do is regulate your own emotional response. This is where Goleman's work is so deeply practical. Emotional self-regulation, the ability to recognize what you're feeling and choose your response rather than being swept away by it, is the skill that protects you right now. Because when you're anxious, when the attachment alarm is going off inside you, you will do things that feel urgent but that don't actually serve you. You'll reach out too much. You'll accept too little. You'll rationalize things that don't add up. You'll talk yourself out of what you clearly see because the alternative feels unbearable. Regulating that response doesn't mean shutting your feelings down. It means creating enough space between what you feel and what you do that you can act from wisdom instead of from fear. It means being able to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty long enough to gather real information before making decisions. It means taking care of yourself with the same tenderness and urgency that you've been pouring into someone who stopped receiving it. The second thing Start paying attention to what the relationship actually gives you versus what you're hoping it will give you. This is such an important distinction because so much of why we stay in situations that aren't working is because we're in love with the potential, with the good version of them, with what it felt like in the beginning, with what we know it could be if only they would just show up the way we need them to. But you cannot live in potential. You cannot build a life on what someone might do someday if the circumstances were different. You can only live in what is actually happening. And if what is actually happening is one-sided and painful and full of distance and confusion, that is what you are choosing every day you stay in it. And choosing to stay in it is your right, absolutely. Some relationships are worth weathering difficulty for. Some people are worth the patience. But you have to be honest about what you're actually doing. You have to look clearly at whether you are weathering something together or you are the only one standing in the rain. The third thing, let yourself grieve what this means. Because recognizing that someone has emotionally left, recognizing that they've made a choice that didn't include you, is a loss, a real one. And our culture is terrible at allowing people to grieve the end of something that hasn't officially ended yet. We don't have language for mourning someone who is still technically present. But the grief is real, and it needs somewhere to go. Goleman writes about the role of emotional processing in building resilience. The people who move through hard experiences with the most grace are not the ones who push through without feeling it. They're the ones who allow themselves to feel it fully enough that the feeling can actually move. Grief that is denied goes underground. It comes back in anxiety and numbness and a creeping inability to trust your own perceptions. But grief that is allowed, that is witnessed and sat with and given space, that grief transforms into clarity, into the kind of quiet strength that knows its own worth. So let yourself feel it. Let yourself acknowledge how much this hurts. Let yourself be honest about what you've been losing in slow motion for longer than you've admitted. And then let that honesty be the beginning of something different. The fourth thing, reconnect with the person you were before this relationship asked you to shrink. Because here is something I've noticed about the specific dynamic of loving someone with avoidant attachment. It tends to gradually reshape the person who loves them. You start to become more careful, more managed, more focused on not triggering their withdrawal. You start to take up less space, have fewer needs, express less of yourself, all in service of keeping things smooth, of not rocking a boat that's already tilting. And by the time you realize what's happened, you've been shrinking for so long that you've almost forgotten what your natural size feels like. Who were you before you started monitoring your own emotions to manage someone else's? What did you care about? What made you laugh without thinking? What were you working toward? What did you want from your life that had nothing to do with being loved by this particular person? Or because that person, the one you were before all the managing and shrinking, that person didn't deserve any of this. And they are still in there, waiting for you to come back to them. Self-awareness is the foundational skill of emotional intelligence. The ability to know yourself clearly, to understand your own values and your own needs and your own non-negotiables. And right now, in the middle of all this confusion and pain, rebuilding that self-awareness is the most powerful thing you can do. Not for the relationship, not to become someone better so they might come back, but for you, because you are the person worth investing in here. Here's something else I want to name before we close this out, because it's important and I don't want you to miss it. None of what I've described today makes the avoidant person a monster. I mean that. The patterns we've been talking about, the withdrawal and the emotional unavailability, and the narrative shifting, these are survival strategies developed in response to real pain, often very early pain. A child who learned that their emotional needs weren't safe, learned what they could to survive that, and then they carried those lessons forward into adult relationships where they no longer serve anyone. Understanding that doesn't mean excusing it. Understanding that doesn't mean you stay. But it does mean that you can release the part of this that's been making you feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with you, because the avoidant pattern is not personal to you. It was there before you arrived. It will be there when you leave. The woman they've chosen instead of you will encounter the same walls eventually, the same distance, the same moments of wondering what happened to the person who made her feel so special in the beginning. That's not a comforting thought exactly, it's just true. And the truth, as hard as it is sometimes, is always more useful than the story that keeps you waiting in a hallway for someone who is already in another room. Your healing starts with honesty, not brutal, beating yourself up honesty, but gentle, clear-eyed, this is what is actually happening honesty. The kind of honesty that says, I deserve more than this and I'm ready to act like it. The kind of honesty that doesn't wait for confirmation from someone who isn't going to give it. The kind of honesty that trusts what it feels in the body and the gut, in that quiet place that has known something was wrong for longer than the mind was willing to admit. You felt it before you even had proof, and you were right to feel it. Your emotional intelligence has been working this whole time. You just needed permission to listen to it, so listen to it. Trust it. Take care of the person it belongs to, because that person, yes, you, is more than worth it. If today's video hit something real for you, drop the word aware in the comments. Just that one word. It lets me know you were here, and it lets you know you're not alone. Because there are thousands of people watching this right now who are sitting with the same quiet ache, the same questions, the same hope that someone will just name what they're feeling. So drop it in the comments, aware, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Because we go deep here. We talk about the real stuff, the kind of stuff that actually changes how you show up for yourself. And you deserve to be in that conversation. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.